All right, guys, today we are talking about Buddhism, which is the second of two world religions that will come out of India. If you're watching this video, you've already heard much about Hinduism, its connection to the caste system and other parts of Indian culture. Buddhism is going to come out of that tradition, out of that culture, and really go a much different direction. So if we want to go ahead and dive in, let's start with our learning intentions, kind of get everything situated together. We're going to talk about the basics of Buddhism in this video because it's important to understand it as part of Indian history, but it's also important to talk about Buddhism because today it's roughly the fourth largest religion in the world. So if you understand how Buddhism works as a religion or as a belief system, you have a good sort of window into a large portion of the world's population. But of course, we're not going into the deepest detail. We're not going into the kind of detail you might get from a religion course, right? But we're just looking at the history of the religion and especially focusing on the main beliefs. And those are going to be the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And they may sound mysterious, but we're going to go through them together in just a few minutes. So if we're going to talk about Buddhism, it's important to review Hinduism because, like we said already, Hinduism and Buddhism both have their roots in India, and Buddhism especially is going to come out of the belief system of Hinduism. So just some important terms that you hopefully have heard and recognize on the screen here. The idea of dharma, the universal law, the idea of each person having a purpose that they are supposed to fulfill in their life. Fulfilling that dharma, fulfilling that purpose builds up good karma, and going counter to that dharma will build up negative or bad karma, which will lead to consequences in your next lifetime. That's the idea of reincarnation. Both Hinduism and Buddhism share this idea of a cycle of rebirth based on what you do in a lifetime. Now, for Hinduism, especially ancient India and earlier India, that is where the caste system is going to come in. The caste system, the social structure sort of separates people based on their occupation, is going to serve as sort of a ladder for reincarnation. Each level in the caste system, each of the varnas and the jatis are going to be sort of rungs on a ladder that you might move up and down on from your many lives. You do really well in one lifetime, your next lifetime, you're going to move up the ladder. So maybe you're down as an untouchable, but you fulfill your dharma, you build up good enough karma that you might be able to move up maybe into that Sudra class in the a next lifetime. Now, if you're thinking about that, you're saying, that sounds like a lot of lifetimes, because what if I think about, what if I don't fulfill everything I'm supposed to? Do I go back down? Well, maybe. And then all of a sudden you're going up and down the ladder, stuck in this cycle of reincarnation for who knows, hundreds or thousands of lifetimes before finally freeing yourself from that. So you can imagine that some people within the Hindu tradition might be looking for a different way, a different sort of understanding of how all of this works. And that's where this guy is going to come in. His name is Siddhartha Gautama. He lived somewhere between 563 and 483 BCE. That's what that question mark is there for. We're not really sure exactly his birth and death dates. And he is going to have a really fascinating story. One of my favorite parts about learning about history is sort of the stories and the people we get to meet. And he's definitely going to be one of those. Because before he becomes known as the Buddha or the enlightened one and founds the religion of Buddhism, he is going to be a prince. The story goes that he was sort of locked away and never had anything negative happen. His parents and his family set up this massive castle where he had a beautiful wife and family and all of the food he could want and all of the drink he could want and everything, all of the riches, everything around him was nice and happy. They purposely made it so that he never had to see any suffering. And the story goes that then he kind of got tired of this and snuck out of the palace one night, disguised himself, and on the first night he's riding around seeing how the rest of us live, and he sees an old man, he sees an aged man, and hunched over trying to walk slowly, and it's a shock to him. He says, what, that man doesn't look like a strong, handsome person that like I'm used to seeing. That's troubling. But he can't get enough. The next night he goes out, and the second night he sees someone who's sick, and he's curious and saddened by this. Look at all this suffering this person is going through. And on the third night, the story goes that he sees a dead man. He sees someone who has just recently passed away. And that, for someone who's never seen any kind of suffering in their life, could, as you could imagine, would be really shocking. So Siddhartha says, this is terrible. There has to be a way to get rid of this suffering of aging, of being sick and sad and dying. This is not something good, and there's got to be a way to get past it. And so he tries a lot of different things. He tries tries to give up all of his wealth and his power, and he goes off, and eventually he sits under a tree, and according to Buddhist teachings, he meditates. He tries to clear his mind and sit there and think about suffering and how to get rid of it. And eventually, Buddhists believe maybe around somewhere around 40 days later, he says, I've got it. I figured it out. I figured out how to make the world less full of suffering. And everyone I can imagine is standing around him saying, okay, go ahead. Let's hear it. And what's going to come out of that sort of thought session, that meditation session, is going to be what Buddhists call the Four Noble Truths. And you can see from this painting of Siddhartha here, of Buddha, he didn't do much eating during that 40 days of meditation, did he? But these Four Noble Truths are going to be sort of the four main things that Buddhists sort of think, classify, and help understand the world. And the first one's kind of a bummer. The first thing that Buddha comes up with is all life is suffering. And can you imagine? Whoa, that's kind of depressing, but okay. If it just stopped right there, it wouldn't be much of a religion or much of a philosophy, would it? But then he goes and tries to explain why. Okay, so all life is suffering. And his second noble truth is that people suffer, though. All this suffering comes from desire, comes from attachment. There's other ways to translate this, but we'll say desires, right? Basically, the second noble truth is we suffer because we want stuff. And if we want to stop suffering, we must stop or overcome desire. And let's try to put this into terms that we can understand from our own lives. Think about something that you really, really want. Let's say a new video game system, new pair of shoes, new something, a new phone. And you really desire that thing. And you say, well, Mom, Dad, I want this new thing. Like, help, let me buy it. And they say, no, you got to earn it yourself. So maybe now you're suffering. You're upset that your parents won't get this thing for you. And so you're like, okay, fine, I'll work for it. So you get a job mowing lawns or whatever it might be. And because you're doing that, your friends ask you to, hang out, and I can't, I have to do this. And so they're suffering too. You're missing time with your friends, and you're suffering because you're doing this hard labor that you don't necessarily want to do. And you finally save up for it. You can't buy other things because you're saving up this money for the one thing you've been desiring. You finally buy it, and you start playing with it if it's a video game, or you start wearing the shoes. And by that point, there's something else you want. Maybe the next video game has come out, or the next model for the shoes, or, the next model for the phone, or God forbid you drop it or you step in a puddle with the new shoes, and all of a sudden it's not what you wanted, and you're suffering again. Right. I think about it when if I'm coaching, right, coaching soccer, and I really want my team to win. Well, when they don't, I'm suffering. I'm upset. Right. So the Buddha would say the easiest thing to do, that if you want to stop all of this suffering, you need to work on not wanting these things or wanting these feelings. If I wanted to be less upset at my team losing, well, I just get to choose that. I get to say, well, I'm going to work on not desiring that. I'm going to go in and not be attached to one expectation or another. And you might be listening at home saying, that's not okay, sure, but that's not easy. And I would agree. It certainly isn't, right? We're human and we want stuff. And if we don't get the stuff we want, we're upset by it. And Buddha's saying we need a way to get away from those desires. We need to think about how can we reorder our lives to not desire things as much. And he comes up with a list of 8 things or 8 ways of living to help us overcome desires. And that's what we call the Eightfold Path. And you can see those 8 things on the right hand or left hand side of your screen. They start with simple things like thinking about the world in the correct way, having the intentions of trying your best to overcome desires. They get into things like right speech and right action, not lying or not hurting people. And eventually it gets to things like right mindfulness and right concentration, learning to meditate or think about and reflect on your lives in ways to help you overcome desire. Now, these 8 right things, these 8 ideas that go into the Eightfold Path are sometimes displayed in the as a wheel or a steering wheel, like that you see on the right-hand side of your screen here. You can remember the Eightfold Path. If you look at the screen, there's sort of 8 spokes on the wheel, right? And these 8 things will kind of help steer, for lack of a better term, your life in the right direction, according to Buddhism. So that's, in the most basic sense, Siddhartha's philosophy, his outlook on life. And he spends the rest of his life preaching these things, giving sermons throughout India, traveling throughout India. But if we rewind back to our first slide, we said it's the 4th largest religion in the world today. Now, India has a huge population. But how does Buddhism spread out of India? How does it get to be the 4th largest religion in the world? And that's going to come because of a man named Asoka. We're going to talk more about Asoka in a different discussion, but I just mentioned him here today because his belief in Buddhism, he converts to Buddhism while he's king, and he realizes he needs to spread it. And he starts sending out missionaries. We know from our vocabulary that a missionary is someone who travels to do religious work. Buddhist missionaries sent out by Asoka, their religious work is to spread Buddhism. And I also mention it here because it's a great example of cultural diffusion. If you look at the map, you'll notice that as Buddhism spreads to China and Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, you can see from the map key that there's different types of Buddhism, Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. And then there's even a difference between the way it's practiced in Tibet versus China and Japan and things like that. So always keep that in mind, that as religions spread and they meet different cultures, they might be practiced in different ways, like you're going to see here with Buddhism. So sort of some main points to remember. If you're saying, Mr. Elliott, this is all very interesting, but also kind of confusing for me. If you look at the screen here, it's kind of 4 things to take away from this little video. First, Buddhism shares the concepts of karma, dharma, reincarnation with Hinduism. They're very similar definitions between the 2 religions and how they see these 3 topics. However, Buddhism from the very beginning is going to reject the caste system. And when I say reject the caste system, I mean that Buddha preached that anyone can achieve enlightenment, can free themselves from the cycle of reincarnation at any point in the caste system. It's not something that has to be climbed like a ladder, which you could imagine for those people in those lower classes or the untouchables, the sudras, they would probably be pretty excited to hear about this. Main beliefs of Buddhism are going to be the 4 Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. We refer to them as holy texts, sacred texts, but they really are more of like a collection of ideas when it comes to Buddhism. And our founder of Buddhism, the Buddha, will be Siddhartha Gautama, and Buddhism is spread later by the Mauryan emperor Asoka.